But under the hood, I knew we were mediocre and we were not very good. And that just ate at me, and it certainly ate at Tony as well. And I remember talking to him and telling him, Tony, I can't give my career to something where we're mediocre and we stink. Well, hello and welcome to the J. Sterling Hughes Show, where we share how we have built our family law practice from 0 to 25 attorneys and over 15 million in revenue, all within our first 10 years. And my purpose here is to document what's working and what's not working, and to share that with you with hopes that you can take that and you can recontextualize it and shorten your success curve. My name is Jeff Hughes, and today we're talking about constraints and how you operate and build your practice. And this is something I have failed to appreciate, the value of operating within constraints in the early formative years of our practice. And so, quick context here, we're 10 years old. And when we started our practice, my partner, Tony Carlson, and I started the practice way back in 2014. We were coming out of another business unrelated to law, where we had a lot of really valuable experience when it came to digital marketing, business acumen, and we also had some financial resources from that business. And so when we started, we just did that with a whole lot of gusto, with our foot on the gas, and tried to grow as quickly as we possibly could. And lo and behold, it actually kind of worked. In our first 18 months, we grew to 8 attorneys, and we felt like, from a size perspective, the ego was being stroked. But under the hood, I knew we were mediocre and we were not very good. And that just ate at me, and it certainly ate at Tony as well. And I remember talking to him and telling him, Tony, I can't give my career to something where we're mediocre and we stink. Looking back, that growth was because we did not force ourselves to operate the law firm within reasonable constraints that would have given us a better foundation. It would have forced us to be more careful in the quality of our service with clients, in our hiring, in our choice of the practice areas that we would have gone into. We didn't do any of those things. And so I remember going to Florida with Tony 18 months into the practice, meeting with a consultant, Lee Rosen, and just kind of coming back from that thinking, my goodness, we need to hit absolute reset on our practice and start over. And we did that. We cut the practice in half to focus on the areas that we knew that we could be exceptional at, and that was family law. So that first recognition of, look, the constraint we need to practice within is the expertise that we are actually good at, and that's family law. And so that first forcing of a constraint turned our business to where it is today. That was really pivotal. Now, I wish I could tell you that the lesson was learned at this point to operate within constraints, but alas, it wasn't, because we still had financial resources. And so every time we confronted a problem, or we wanted to open up a new area before we had successfully grown the prior area, we just threw money at the problem. And as a result, our expenses got out of control, and we were just spending money like drunken sailors. For many years, we kept doing that over and over again. So the constraint of expertise, the constraint of money took us a while to learn. So I want to dig into those ideas of constraint today and how to leverage constraints to profitably and successfully build your law practice, and in particular, your family law practice, because that's where I operate and where we operate. So I'm going to talk about what are constraints, why they work like they do, and how can you leverage them? How can you use them for your benefit? So to begin with, what are constraints and how do they show up? How can you identify them? There's the obvious one of time constraints. Every lawyer seems to be plagued with the constraint of time, not having enough time to do all the things that you want to do, that you need to do, that you, quote, must do to grow your law practice or to grow your firm or whatever. Then there's the money constraint, not having enough financial resources to hire the people that you need to hire, to buy the tools that you need to buy, the office space that you want, that you feel that you need, whatever the case is, not having those financial resources there. Constraints can also show up in having the expertise, the skills, the legal abilities that you need to grow into a certain type of practice area to offer the solutions that you want to offer to your clients. And it could also show up in something as soft as not having the network that you need, not having the ability to reach out and to partner with others through your network or whatever, to find the right resources through your network. Those are some of the major constraints that can show up that could be prohibitive or could limit your ability to grow your practice. Why does operating within constraints actually work and not getting outside of those constraints? Well, when we operate within our time constraints, meaning we have a time constraint, so we recognize that time constraint, realize, look, I don't have enough time to do all of these things. So what are those few things that I can do within my time constraint to be successful? That forces us to find better solutions, to find more focused solutions. That also shows up in giving us the capacity to find the more simple solution, because complexity seems to creep up everywhere. And given enough time, at least I do, and I know many others, tend to find ways to make things more complex than they need to be. So if we only have a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of financial resources, we tend to find that simple solution that almost always works better than the complex solution over time, that allows you to grow and scale your firm better when it's based on simplicity, when the processes are simple, when the practice areas are simple. Whatever it is that you're doing to grow your practice is simple and repeatable. It's much easier to grow your practice based on those sort of processes. Also, the fewer decisions that you're making, because you don't have the time to make a lot of them, you tend to make better decisions. You avoid decision fatigue. Your decisions on the front end with the few that you're making tend to be a little stronger, a little more simple than the more complex ones that happen as you don't operate within those constraints of time. I've also found that when you have a lot of financial resources and you are not as careful about guarding those and managing those, your profits erode. You tend to have expenses kind of creep up like plaque in your practice. I know in our case, when we have operate within constraints rather than trying to push, it's forced us to make really essential, critical decisions, which led to us cultivating talent and resources that would have otherwise, frankly, gone undeveloped. We wouldn't have developed those things. And so that's been a byproduct of operating within constraints and building our practice in the recent years within our constraints. This is rarely talked about. When you operate within constraints, it gives you an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset, because you know you have just a little bit. So you tend to find more abundance out there than focusing on just the narrow few things that you think you have to solve a problem. All right, so how do you use constraints? So time constraints. If you have a time constraint, move fast, move quick, break things, fail fast. Find those few essential things that you can do, execute those quickly, figure out what's working, what's not working. If you have a ton of time, you're going to fill that time with something, right? You're going to fill it up. But if you know you have a narrow amount of time, you only have a few hours a week to do marketing, for example. Think through carefully what's the most essential activities you can do that week, you can execute on that are marketing oriented, and do those things. Make quick, fast decisions, fail quickly, figure out what's working, what's not working, repeat that thing that is working. So if money is your constraint, then you have to think creatively. You have to find creative solutions rather than throwing money at a problem. Find a way to do it outside of the box that is more creative than you would have otherwise forced yourself to do. If you have an expertise issue and you want to offer a legal solution that you don't have the expertise to offer, don't offer it. Become more focused on those things that you can deliver that will sharpen your marketing message, that will sharpen your relationship building, and that will telegraph to the client that, hey, look, I don't do these other things. I only focus on these few problems, but I do these exceptionally well. That constraint really does pay off over time. And then if your network is constrained, you don't have a big network. You don't know a ton of people, right? You can waste a lot of time trying to, quote, build your network and build relationships. But if you know you only have a little bit of time to build that network, focus on those few relationships that are going to be the biggest return for you. So operating and building your practice within a few constraints pays off.